I found the recording by accident, buried in Melissa's phone when she asked me to check her messages while she was in the shower. Her voice, crystal clear. "He's completely broken down, Evelyn." Perfect timing. The grief has made him so pathetic, he'll sign anything I put in front of him. My wife of 8 years, the woman who held me while I sobbed over my father's casket just 3 days ago, laughing with my estranged sister about how pathetic I'd become. The phone trembled in my hands as I realized everything, every gentle touch, every whispered comfort, every "let me handle this, love," had been a lie. My name is Daniel Grayson, and until that moment, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. I'm a 34-year-old corporate attorney specializing in mergers and acquisitions, or I was, before Dad's sudden heart attack turned my world upside down. James Grayson had built an empire from nothing, real estate holdings, tech investments, and a consulting firm that bore his name. He was my mentor, my hero, and the one person who never doubted me when everyone else did, including my sister, Evelyn. Evelyn is 3 years older and has spent most of those years resenting me. When Dad started grooming me to understand the business at 16, she accused him of favoritism. When I graduated law school and began handling the family's legal affairs, she called it nepotism. When Dad and I grew closer over shared interests in chess and vintage wines, she stopped coming to family dinners altogether. The last conversation I had with Evelyn was 2 years ago at Mom's funeral. She cornered me at the reception and hissed, "You always were his golden boy. Don't think it'll last forever." Then she moved to Seattle and we barely spoke since. But Melissa, God, how I loved Melissa. We met at a charity gala 6 years ago. She was working as an event coordinator, elegant in a simple black dress that somehow outshone every designer gown in the room. She had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. When I told her about Dad's expectations, my fears about living up to his legacy, she'd stroke my hair and whisper, "You're stronger than you know, Danny. You don't need anyone's approval to be extraordinary." She quit her job after we married, saying she wanted to focus on us and maybe start a family soon. I supported her completely, setting up generous monthly transfers to her personal account and putting her name on most of our assets. Why wouldn't I? She was my partner, my safe harbor, the person who made my father smile whenever she brought him homemade soup during his last illness. Dad adored Melissa. "She's good for you, son," he'd say. "Makes you softer around the edges without losing your strength." He even joked about rewriting his will to include her directly, calling her the daughter I never had. How perfectly that played into their hands. The disrespect started small, so small I convinced myself I was imagining things. 3 weeks after the funeral, while I was still taking bereavement leave, I noticed Melissa spending unusual amounts of time on her phone. When I asked about it, she'd smile and say she was handling the boring stuff so I could focus on healing. She'd taken over all communication with Dad's attorney, his accountant, even the funeral home for final arrangements. "You shouldn't have to deal with paperwork right now," she'd coo, rubbing my shoulders. "That's what wives are for." Then there were the phone calls she'd take in the other room, always just checking on things or coordinating with the estate attorney. But I started noticing how her voice changed during these calls, sharper, more calculating. Once, I heard her laugh in a way I'd never heard before, cold and triumphant. When I mentioned wanting to review Dad's will myself, she looked genuinely distressed. "Oh, honey, no. Your father specifically asked me to shield you from the legal complexities. He said you were too much like him. You'd bury yourself in work to avoid grieving properly." That should have been my first red flag. Dad never said things like that. He believed in facing problems head-on, not hiding from them. But I was drowning in grief, and Melissa seemed like the only lifeline I had. The subtle exclusions came next. Melissa would hang up calls quickly when I entered the room. She'd redirect mail before I could see it, claiming she was organizing everything for me. When I suggested calling Evelyn to let her know about Dad's service, Melissa's face went strange. "Actually, I already reached out to her," she said. "She's processing the loss in her own way. Maybe give her some space?" I should have questioned why my sister, who despised me, was suddenly in regular contact with my wife. I should have wondered why Melissa, who used to encourage me to repair that relationship, was now building walls around it. Instead, I let myself be managed, controlled, infantilized by the woman who whispered sweet lies about protecting me while she systematically destroyed my birthright. The most painful part? She was so good at it. Every manipulation came wrapped in love, every lie delivered with tears in her eyes. When I had nightmares about Dad, she'd hold me until I fell back asleep. When I couldn't eat, she'd make my favorite meals and hand-feed me like a child. All while she and Evelyn laughed about how easily they were pulling one over on pathetic Daniel Grayson. The moment of clarity came exactly 6 weeks after Dad's death, triggered by something absurdly mundane: a bank statement. I was looking for our joint account information to pay the mortgage when I found a statement from one of Dad's business accounts, one that should have been dormant. There were transfers happening, large ones, money moving in patterns that made no sense for a deceased person's estate. When I showed Melissa, she barely glanced at it. "Oh, that's just the attorney handling debts and fees. Nothing for you to worry about." But I was a corporate lawyer. I knew what estate management looked like, and this wasn't it. That night, while Melissa slept, I drove to Dad's old office, the one I had keys to but hadn't visited since his death. I spent 4 hours going through his files, his computer, his personal safe. What I found changed everything. Dad's real will was nothing like what Melissa claimed. There were no complex legal hurdles, no mysterious debts, no reason for the delays she kept citing. The estate was straightforward. Everything to me, with small provisions for charity and a modest trust for any future grandchildren. More importantly, I found Dad's phone records from his final month. The last number he'd called repeatedly was mine. Not Melissa's, mine. He'd been trying to reach me in his final days, and somehow those calls never got through. I sat in Dad's leather chair, the one I'd inherit along with everything else, and felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, but underneath it was something harder, colder, more focused. They thought I was broken. They thought grief had made me weak, pliable, easy to manipulate. They were wrong. I wasn't broken. I was angry. And anger, properly channeled, is the most clarifying emotion in the world. I looked at my phone and saw 17 missed calls from Melissa, probably wondering where I'd gone. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching private investigators in the city. If my wife and sister wanted to play games with my father's legacy, I'd make sure they played by my rules. I spent the next 3 days planning my response with the same methodical precision I'd use for a complex merger. Every detail mattered. Every move had to be calculated for maximum impact. First, I needed evidence. Real, court-admissible, career-destroying evidence. I hired Marcus Webb, a former FBI agent turned private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. Marcus was expensive, discreet, and had a reputation for finding needles in haystacks. I also retained Sarah Chen, a forensic document examiner who'd testified in high-profile fraud cases, and Robert Kellner, an estate attorney who'd worked with Dad years earlier and knew his actual wishes. The plan was simple. Let Melissa and Evelyn believe they were winning while I built an airtight case against them. Marcus installed monitoring software on our home computers and tracked Melissa's phone activities. Within a week, he'd identified regular communication with Evelyn, including calls to something called Document Solutions LLC, a company that specialized in, among other things, high-quality document reproduction. Sarah analyzed every piece of paperwork Melissa had shown me, comparing them to samples of Dad's actual handwriting from his office files. The discrepancies were glaring once you knew what to look for. Robert helped me understand exactly what laws were being broken. Fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, obstruction of justice. The list grew longer each day. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed them to commit their crimes publicly, undeniably, in a way that would destroy them both professionally and personally. That's when I remembered Dad's favorite chess strategy, the sacrifice play. Sometimes you have to let your opponent think they're winning, right up until the moment you deliver checkmate. I would let them file their fraudulent will. Let them think they'd successfully stolen my inheritance. Let them stand up in court and commit perjury under oath. And then I would destroy them with their own words. The estate hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. I dressed carefully that day, one of Dad's old suits, altered to fit me. Melissa noticed and squeezed my hand. "You look just like him," she said softly. "He'd be so proud of how you're handling all this." I squeezed back and smiled. I learned from the best. She had no idea how true that was. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Judge Martinez presided, flanked by the court reporter and bailiff. Melissa sat beside me, playing the supportive wife perfectly, dabbing her eyes with tissues, holding my hand, whispering encouragement. Evelyn sat across the room with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who clearly cost more than Evelyn should have been able to afford. My sister looked confident, almost smug. She'd gained weight since Mom's funeral, and her designer suit couldn't quite hide it. Success, it seemed, agreed with her. The hearing began with routine procedural matters. Then Evelyn's attorney stood to present what she claimed was Dad's true final will, a document supposedly executed just 2 weeks before his death, leaving everything to Evelyn and establishing Melissa as executor of a special trust. I watched Melissa's face as the forged will was read aloud. She played her part beautifully, shock, confusion, then reluctant acceptance. "If this is what James wanted," she said through manufactured tears, "then of course we'll honor his wishes." The judge asked if I contested the will. This was my moment. I stood slowly, pulled a flash drive from my jacket pocket, and held it up. "Your Honor, I believe this will clarify the situation." What happened next was everything I'd dreamed of and more. The first recording played through the courtroom speakers, Melissa and Evelyn discussing how to handle me during my grief. Melissa's voice, clear as daylight. "He's so broken right now, he'll believe anything. We just need to keep him isolated until it's too late for him to fight back." I watched the color drain from both their faces. The second recording was even better. Evelyn instructing someone at Document Solutions on exactly how to replicate Dad's signature, complete with pressure points and pen preferences. Sarah Chen's side-by-side signature comparison appeared on the courtroom screen next. The differences were so obvious that even laypeople could see them. Wrong pen pressure, incorrect letter spacing, tremors in lines that Dad's steady hand would never have produced. Then came the GPS evidence. Marcus had tracked Melissa's phone to a strip mall notary office on the date the will was supposedly signed. Unfortunately for her, that notary had been in Florida visiting family that entire weekend, a fact easily verified by his credit card records and airline receipts. The final piece was my favorite. A voice analysis of a voicemail I had supposedly left for Melissa, expressing my desire to be done with Dad's money and all the stress it brings. The audio forensics expert had identified telltale signs of AI voice synthesis, micro stutters, and frequency anomalies that human speech doesn't produce. By the time I finished presenting evidence, Melissa was sobbing. Real tears this time. Evelyn sat frozen, staring at the table like she could disappear through willpower alone. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "This court finds clear and convincing evidence of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. I'm ordering an immediate criminal investigation and referring this matter to the district attorney's office." The bailiff moved toward Melissa and Evelyn with handcuffs. I sat back down and watched my wife of 8 years, the woman who'd held me while I grieved, who'd made me soup when I was sick, who'd promised to love me in sickness and health, get arrested for trying to steal my father's legacy. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The criminal charges came down like dominoes. Melissa and Evelyn were both charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. The bail hearing made local news. Sisters-in-law accused of $12 million estate fraud. Melissa's bail was set at $500,000. She called me, sobbing, begging me to help. I let it go to voicemail. Evelyn's bail was even higher, $750,000, because she'd fled to her car and tried to drive away from the courthouse. The police caught her 3 blocks away, crying hysterically about how this would ruin everything. She was right. While they sat in jail awaiting trial, I activated the second phase of my revenge. The divorce papers were served to Melissa in her cell on a Thursday morning. Our prenuptial agreement, the one she'd signed without reading carefully, trusting me completely, contained a clause that voided all her claims to marital assets in case of criminal conviction. Her attorney tried to argue the clause was unenforceable, but 3 different judges disagreed. Melissa would leave our marriage with exactly what she'd brought into it: nothing. Her criminal trial lasted 6 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the front row where she could see me. I wanted her to know I was watching as witness after witness destroyed her credibility. The forensic accountant who traced every fraudulent transaction, the document expert who explained exactly how the forgeries were created, the voice analysis specialist who played her fake recordings alongside the real ones. But my favorite witness was Dr. Patricia Vance, the therapist Melissa and Evelyn had bribed to create false records about my supposed mental instability. Dr. Vance had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. She testified in excruciating detail about how Melissa had approached her with a specific script of what the fake therapy notes should contain. She told me exactly what to write, Dr. Vance said, her voice barely above a whisper. She said Daniel needed to look unstable enough that no one would trust him with money, but not so unstable that it would seem obviously fake. I watched Melissa's face crumble as her own words were read back to the jury. The verdict came after deliberating for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Melissa got 7 years in federal prison. Evelyn got 9 because she was considered the ringleader. But prison was just the beginning of their punishment. Evelyn lost everything. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. Her former employer sued her for breach of fiduciary duty and recovered $2.3 million in damages. The professional disgrace followed her everywhere. I made sure of that by providing court records to every industry publication and professional organization she'd ever belonged to. She tried to find work in Seattle, then Portland, then smaller cities throughout the Pacific Northwest. But a simple Google search of her name brought up dozens of news articles about the fraud case. Heiress, sister, and wife conspire to steal $12 million estate, caught by husband's silent trap, was the headline that stuck. 6 months after sentencing, Evelyn filed for bankruptcy. A year later, she was working part-time at a grocery store in Spokane, living in a studio apartment above a laundromat. I know because Marcus still sends me updates. Melissa's fall was even more satisfying. Her parents disowned her after the trial, unable to bear the shame of having raised a daughter capable of such calculated cruelty. Her few remaining friends disappeared once the news broke. The elegant woman who'd once commanded charity galas and dinner parties was now prisoner number 47,291 in the Federal Correctional Institution at Dublin, California. She writes me letters sometimes, long, rambling apologies mixed with desperate pleas for money for commissary items. She claims she still loves me, that Evelyn manipulated her into the scheme, that she never meant for things to go so far. I burn the letters without reading them completely. I've seen enough of Melissa's lies to last several lifetimes. With Dad's estate finally settled according to his actual wishes, I inherited everything. $12.7 million in assets, the consulting firm, the real estate holdings, and the family home where I grew up. But the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was what I did with it. I established the James Grayson Foundation for Financial Abuse Victims, dedicating $2 million to help people who'd been cheated by trusted family members or spouses. The foundation provides legal assistance, counseling services, and emergency financial support. The scholarship program was my personal touch. The Daniel Grayson Integrity Grant provides full college tuition for students from Evelyn's hometown who demonstrate exceptional moral character and resilience in the face of family adversity. The first recipient was a young woman whose older sister had stolen her college fund. Every year, when the scholarship is announced in the local newspaper, the same newspaper that covered Evelyn's arrest, I know she sees it. I know she reads my name and remembers exactly how much she lost when she decided to bet against me. The foundation's annual gala is held every November on the anniversary of Dad's death. It's become quite the social event. Prominent judges, attorneys, business leaders, all gathered to celebrate integrity and justice. The guest speaker this year was Judge Martinez, who talked about the importance of family loyalty and the devastating consequences when that trust is broken. I always save a seat for Melissa and Evelyn at these events. Empty chairs with little plaques bearing their names right there at the head table where everyone can see them. They're never able to attend, of course. Scheduling conflicts. 3 years later, I've rebuilt everything they tried to destroy. The consulting firm is thriving under my leadership. I've bought a new house, modern, clean, with no memories of Melissa's lies embedded in the walls. I date occasionally, though I'm more careful now about trusting people who seem too good to be true. Marcus Webb sends me quarterly updates on both women. Melissa has 18 months left on her sentence and has apparently found religion in prison. She leads a Bible study group and works in the prison library. Her parole hearing is scheduled for next year, but her chances are slim. She violated probation terms by continuing to contact me despite a restraining order. Evelyn never recovered. Last report had her working at a call center in Boise, living with 2 roommates in a trailer park. She's gained over 60 pounds, developed diabetes, and her drinking problem has gotten worse since the bankruptcy. Her ex-husband remarried and won't let her see their kids unsupervised. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far, if the punishment exceeded the crime. Then I remember that recording, Melissa's voice calling me pathetic while I was still crying over my father's grave. And I know I did exactly what needed to be done. They wanted to erase me from my own family's legacy. They wanted to steal not just money, but my father's final wishes, his trust, his love, made manifest in legal documents. Instead, they gave me something far more valuable, absolute clarity about who they really were beneath their masks. Dad used to say that character is revealed not in good times, but in how people behave when they think no one is watching. Melissa and Evelyn showed me their true characters, and I responded accordingly. They thought they were playing chess against a grieving, broken man. They were wrong on both counts. I was never broken. I was just waiting for the right moment to show them what real power looked like. And now, every morning when I wake up in my clean house with my clear conscience and my father's legacy intact, I remember the most important lesson of all. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's winning so completely that your enemies destroy themselves trying to recover. Melissa has 4 years left in federal prison. Evelyn will spend the rest of her life explaining to potential employers why Grayson estate fraud is the first thing that appears when they Google her name. And me? I'm exactly where I belong, carrying on my father's work, protecting his memory, and making sure that anyone who tries to prey on grieving families faces consequences they'll never forget. They wanted my fortune. I gave them infamy. Some gifts keep on giving. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.